What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, the medium large sports network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Daniel Starkand and Scott Geirman with a little bit of Tuesday morning breaking news. Folks, if you thought the Dodgers were done with Sasaki and then Tanner Scott, I have news for you. We got some news that Kirby Yates is joining the Dodgers. We are short on details as we record this, but Scott, I'm going to come straight to you. This is a name you mentioned on our show last week, post Sasaki, kind of what they might do. Ironically, we were all talking about if they didn't sign Scott, this might be a guy that got both, Scott.
Yeah. Kirby Yates is someone that I've had my eye on for a bit because the Tanner Scott numbers is something that we just haven't seen Andrew Friedman really dive into yet. Aside from like Kenley Jansen era stuff, like it's that type of splash was something that if they do opt for someone else, if they do opt for another 1-year flyer, like we've seen with a lot of these, like the arms that Andrew Friedman brings in, Kirby Yates is someone that I've had my eye on for a bit. He fits the mold of what they love recently. He's the same type of stuff that they've had with Michael Kopech, Blake Snell, big strikeouts. You'll live with the walk rate. But as far as what Kirby Yates has, there is so much to like. We'll get into it. But with Kirby Yates, he's an older arm, but there's miles on it. But he just provides an absolute upside with the just utmost of performance.
Yeah, we've got a video coming out on this channel where I got to chat with Lance Brozdowski, and we talked kind of about the profile. So I don't want to dive too much into that personally, because that'll be a good conversation I believe we'll be posting tomorrow. But Daniel, when you look at Yates, he's 37. Realistically, he's going to be 38, essentially by the time the season starts, end of March. And yet, he doesn't rely on a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. His fastball sits like 93 and a half, 94. He was the best in Major League Baseball. Him and Mason Miller were 1 and 2 in every expected number, expected ERA, expected batting average, expected slugging percentage. And so, yes, the age is up there, but this guy continues to get it done and will be a real weapon in the back of the bullpen.
Yeah, and look, we're sitting here on January 21st and no one had signed him yet. So the Dodgers were probably just like, hey, we might as well bring him on. I know, they were obviously talking with him and we all thought once they got Tanner Scott that they're probably out on him. But at this point in the offseason, if the guy doesn't have any offers and you could bring him in on, we don't know the terms yet, but I'm guessing my guess would be, 1 year, maybe 12 million or, somewhere in that ballpark. It makes all the sense in the world. Like Andrew Friedman sat there and basically telegraphed everything he was going to do this offseason. He said, hey, we don't want to buy in July. Like prices are extremely high in July. So we don't want to be in a position where, hey, we need bullpen help at the trade deadline. Now we have to give up one of our top prospects or, like we saw with the Padres last year, they gave up 2 of their top prospects to bring in a Tanner Scott. So the Dodgers were like, hey, we might as well just sign these guys now. And then we'd rather give up, 10 to 12 million bucks now and save our prospects instead of having to overpay at the deadline. So that's kind of, what we saw here. Obviously, Kirby Yates coming off an exceptional year. You kind of laid out the numbers. It's just yet another high leverage arm to add to this mix, which is now looking like, probably the best bullpen in baseball. And we're already have, the best starting rotation in baseball, probably the best lineup in baseball. So, the Dodgers are just covering all their bases this offseason.
Best manager in baseball, some would say as well. So you could throw that into the mix. But I mean, Scott, I kind of made the comment that Daniel just shared, which is I think Andrew Friedman is sick of paying August prices for starting pitchers and relievers. And he's just like, screw it. Like, I don't care if I have quote unquote too many of these guys in January, February, March, April, because I just don't want to have to pay. You mentioned, I mean, I believe it was basically the Padres sent 3 of their top 5 or 6 prospects for half of a season of Tanner Scott a year ago. Do you think it's as simple, Scott, as the Dodgers basically saying, increase the size of the pool of guys that we have at the beginning of the year and just cross your fingers, hope and trust that by the time you get to July, August, and September, they're not going to be as desperate as they have in years past?
I love that you brought that up. And it's something that we could have a larger conversation about with this front office currently. Jeff, Daniel, we've seen the signings. Like when they brought in Tyler Glasnow, the conversation around it was that when he's at his peak, when these players are at their peak, but there's stuff that we can talk about, injury concerns. And Andrew Friedman, Brandon Gomes, and the rest of this front office talks about when you're out there, how are you performing when you're at your best? You'll live with some of these things. You'll absorb the cost because when you're out there, you're getting 1A tier 1 performance.
Yep.
So with Kirby Yates, if this is something, he's an older arm, just like we've talked about. You look at the peak performance there. these arms are currently out here on the free agent market. Go get them now. And if you don't get an entire full season, you pay the cost that it takes to get them in-house. So just like you said, you can do it now. You don't have to pay that inflated cost towards the deadline. But I want to circle back later on to, just like what we talked about is the on-field performance when you've got them ready to go. The Dodgers are stockpiling themselves with guys who, if you can overlap their time when they're healthy, you're getting as good as it can get as far as the stable of arms you have. So with an arm like Yates, this is someone when he's out there, if not for Emmanuel Clase, Jeff, he's the American League reliever of the year, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, I mean, you look at the back of this bullpen, you've got Evan Phillips, Michael Kopech, Blake Trinan, Kirby Yates, Tanner Scott. I would include Alex Vesia in there when you look at an ERA that starts with a 1 last year. That's 6 guys. And realistically, I'm not even going to sit here and say, Daniel, well, as long as 4 or 5 of those guys is healthy, like as long as 3 of those guys are healthy at any given point, you're going to be fine. And again, the Dodgers' goal is actually, as long as we've got those guys in September, October, November, we kind of don't care about the rest. And we're not even talking about Brusdar Graterol, Edgardo Enriquez, like some of these other relievers that they've got with the upside to be included in that list. Not to mention, what if Bobby Miller doesn't have a spot in the rotation? What if Ben Kasparius doesn't have a spot in the rotation? What if Emmett Sheehan, Dustin May don't have spots in the? I mean, we're talking about the stuff numbers on all of these guys is going to be insane. And so it feels like, Daniel, it's throw a bunch of numbers at this problem and just hope that 4 or 5 of them are still standing come October, November.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen in years past, even, this past year, how many injuries could hit you. Like, there's no way to really, plan for that. And I guess the best way to plan for that is to just stockpile as many quality arms as possible. And that's what we've seen, the Dodgers doing. And we saw even this morning, like part of, I think it was Bob Nightingale tweeted, like part of the reason they signed Yates is because Michael Kopech is not healthy.
Yeah.
And we know he was kind of, dealing with some forearm stuff in the playoffs last year. Didn't really affect his performance much, but now we're hearing he could be out for the start of the season. So when you talk about that, we know Brusdar Graterol is going to be out for probably half the year. And then when you look at some of their other guys, and we know they've kind of all have dealt with their fair share of injuries. Like Evan Phillips was not on the World Series roster. Blake Trinan missed 2 years, at one point. So, you can't really bank on all these guys staying healthy. So the Dodgers are like, hey, we're just going to bring in as many guys as possible. And like you said, if we have 3 or 4 of those high leverage guys in the playoffs, then we're in good shape.
Yeah, Daniel mentions Bob Nightingale reporting that part of the reason for this signing is that Michael Kopech could miss the first month of the season, was, I believe, how his tweet was worded. Fabian Ardaya followed up and said that it was a forearm injury that he was dealing with at the end of last season. It was not bad enough that it prevented him from pitching. And yet, Scott, how surprised were you to see that kind of just... I love Nightingale. He just almost like as an aside, like, well, yeah, it's because Kopech. And it's like, hey, buddy, nobody knew that. Like you just breaking news on accident, Bob Nightingale here. But how surprised were you that Kopech's dealing with something that apparently could cost him the first month or so of the season?
A little bit surprised. I would say a little bit surprised there. He's dealt with some right shoulder inflammation in the past. We're talking, middle of 2023, back into 2023. Nothing this past year up until the postseason. Is it surprising that he pitched through it? I mean, I would say a little bit, but if it was to the point where the injury wasn't enough to, like the Dodgers did, they didn't keep him out. Is it going to be troubling that he's missing a month in a walk, going into a walk year for himself, where he's talked about wanting to possibly be a starting pitcher? Yeah, there's some concerns there. He probably wants to see how his, that injury responds, what goes on there. So for Bob Nightingale to just casually toss that in there, like everybody knew that he was dealing with, kind of a forearm injury here. That is surprising. So something to keep tabs on, but definitely a move where I'm very happy that the Dodgers were aggressive enough that they said this is something that they needed to fill those innings. So yeah, it's something to put a pin in. We'll keep tabs on it, and something that they're replacing Michael Kopech, who is a very quality high leverage arm, with another quality high leverage arm, someone that you can, that's the concerning part for me. I think the Dodgers could have gone without Kirby Yates, but now that this news comes out that Kopech's going to miss some time, we don't know how much. We don't know if there's some, on his side, is he going to want to keep himself out just to make sure everything's all good to go? It's something to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I remember in the World Series, there was one particular instance where the heart of the lineup for the Yankees was coming up, and they ended up going with Ryan Brazier in that spot and not Michael Kopech. And I remember, I was looking back through old tweets and I was like, yeah, wait, what? Why did they do that? And it's possible, Daniel, that we have more information on that now. Last note on this, the other piece of this, how the heck do they fit all these guys on the 40-man roster? I believe prior to the Tanner Scott news becoming official, and the Kirby Yates deal becoming official, they have 39 guys on the 40-man roster. The good news, Roki Sasaki, it's technically qualifies as a minor league deal, at least to start with. So he doesn't need to be added to the 40-man roster anytime soon. Obviously, a bunch, 5 or 6 40-man roster spots are going to open up once pitchers and catchers report in a few weeks. But Daniel, do you think either A, this is a precursor to a trade being made, or B, that with a veteran like Kirby Yates or Tanner Scott, maybe there's a handshake agreement of like, hey, give us a few weeks. We'll make this official once pitchers and catchers report and once we can clear some spots.
I do think we're close enough to pitchers and catchers reporting that you probably can tell a guy like Kirby Yates, like, hey, just hang on for a couple more weeks and then we'll make this official. Just knowing, first of all, we got to see what his physical, looks like, because that's kind of the reports we saw this morning. And that's kind of why we don't have terms of the deal yet. So, the guy is about to turn 38. So we'll see how that physical looks. But if they do pass him and follow through, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just kind of hang on for a couple more weeks. Because like you said, the Dodgers might have 5 or 6 guys that you could just put right on the 60-day IL, and that's going to open up the 40-man roster spots you need. So that would probably be my guess. But at the same time, it's the Dodgers, so you never know what else they're cooking up here. Like, there could be another trade they're working on. Like, the fact that they're bringing in all these pitchers, like, maybe that makes them feel like they do have a bit of a surplus when it comes to arms, so they could trade, one of their young guys who, if you look around the league, there's still plenty of teams that could use pitching right now. And it's pretty clear that none of them really want to spend money. So if you're willing to trade one of your young guys who are basically making pennies, you might be able to get like a pretty good prospect package. Like, we've seen the Dodgers do that, where they kind of buy and sell at the same time. And that's usually worked out pretty well for them. Like, if you look at the trades they've made, whether it's Michael Busch and Yency Almonte for Zaire Hope and Jackson Ferris, or Mitch White for Nick Frasso, Matt Beatty for River Ryan. Like, we've seen them sell off pieces and they get prospects who everyone's like, why are you making this deal? And then 2 years down the road, that guy's, a top prospect in the organization. So something like that wouldn't surprise me. But I also, considering how many guys get injured, I don't know if now is necessarily the time to trade from a pitching surplus, just because you don't exactly know what you're going to need. Like, maybe when July comes around, if you still have too many arms, then you could kind of make a deal. I don't know if you'd want to do that in January, but the good thing is that, the Dodgers have options here. They're putting together one of the best 40-man rosters in the history of baseball. So it has been fun to track. And, every move you're like, all right, like, now they're done. Like, it's been a great off season, and then they just make another one. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's another move coming here at some point.
Scott, taking Kike and Chris and Clayton Kershaw off of the table is guys that I think a lot of people, Kershaw's a slam dunk. Kike, I think, depending on how confident, the varying levels of confidence. Outside of those two, I'll put you on the spot. Is there another move coming for the Dodgers? Either a trade away or an acquisition in?
I think they're good. I think they were
I
okay.
think they're good too.
I think this is, they were okay at varying points. You could have, like I said, you could have just put a pin in it and just let it be. And this was the roster before Tanner Scott. It would have been nice, but you could have done stuff without it. But obviously they see the roster in different spots and how to add. If the players are out there, keep emphasizing this. And a lot of the narrative on social media now is taking this on. The players are still out there. If there's a team willing to sign them and the players interested in signing, go ahead. Like, the narrative is shifting. Like, we see it day to day. It's from a Dodgers standpoint, from where we sit, I'm not frustrated by the chatter at all. Everybody can talk about the Dodgers continuously adding on prize prospects, pieces, everything you want. The players are out there. The money's out there for them to take it. They're going to take the best deal. You can perform. You can get paid. But to piggyback on what Daniel said about a move we could see, I know this is someone we've talked about who could be, DFA'd or moved in the past, Michael Grove. I just think it's at a certain point where if there's one name out there that can kind of be a little highlighted, he has filled in for some spots in the past. I know he was added to the DS roster. Michael Grove is someone who I think the Dodgers could move off of the roster. They could DFA him. They could move him in a trade. I don't know how much you're going to get for that. I don't think you're going to get a dart throw prospect for him, but that's someone who, if there's a glaring name, if they have to get someone, I think Michael Grove could be the move off the roster.
ESPN Sportsbook, by the way, the Dodgers are the biggest World Series favorite entering a season since 2007. 3-1 odds to win the World Series, which is insanity. That's don't bet it.
And I will say the fact that, you know, someone was a bigger favorite in 2007 and baseball survived, I guess all the fans complaining should maybe just relax a little bit, because this stuff like this has happened before, and the sport has gone on.
Yeah, the 2007 Yankees were the other the last time that the favorites were this big, and guess what? They did not win.
They didn't win. They didn't win.
Don't get me going on Yankees fans right now. Some Yankees fans are
Boston Red Sox won the 2007 World Series. Anyone remember who they beat?
Was it the Rockies?
Colorado Rockies.
Rockies, yeah, that's right.
The
Rockies had that crazy run. Yep. I remember that.
Yep, 4-0 sweep. But sweep. That's crazy. Yep. The Rockies were in the World Series. That the last time that the team was this heavily favored, the Rockies were in the World Series. Maybe that's how I share that stat next time. Forget 2007. Crazy. Rockies in the World Series sounds a lot further away. So, folks, we got lots more to cover on this topic. Anthony Witrado and I will be back right here on this channel live tonight. As I mentioned, we've got an interview with Lance Brozdowski that'll probably post tomorrow. Andy McCall of The Athletic's going to be on this channel later in the week talking about, are the Dodgers ruining baseball? So with tons of content coming right here on this channel, go ahead, subscribe, ring the notification bell. We'd love to have you as part of the Dodger Blue crew. That is Daniel. That is Scott. I am Jeff, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. As always, go Dodgers.